I got initiated into a secret occultic kingdom 16 years ago, when I was just 7 years old and in my 3rd grade. The initiation was performed through an apple. I remember that day so well. It was through an apple. Everyone knows us so well. My elder sister and I. The neighborhood kids called us Omosa, which means gluttons. We ate from door to door. And in school, they called us the parasites. This was because we never got tired of eating from other people's snacks with nothing to offer in return. Before you blame us, please listen to the full story. My name is Chidera Okoli. I'm the 2nd child and only son of Mr. Ikenna and Mrs. Uju Okoli. There was just the 2 of us, me and my sister Kambili. Our parents were notoriously careless and neglectful. They ran a bustling beer parlor, sacrificing family time for financial stability. Every morning, they would leave for work before sunrise and return long after dusk, tired and exhausted. Kambili and I were often left to fend for ourselves. In addition to being neglectful, my dad was also a miser. He exerted total control over the household, overseeing even the smallest details, including food and shopping. At home, he kept a locked store where he stockpiled foodstuffs and measured out precise quantities for Mom whenever she wanted to cook. And she never complained. Rather, she scolded us for daring to trespass. Kambili and I eat only twice a day, very little portions of food. In the morning, before going to school, and late at night after they came back from the bar. Some nights, Dad and Mom would come back very late after we were already sleeping. On nights like this, there would be nothing for us to eat, and our breakfast would still be the same quantity. All they cared about was the progress of their bar, and they wouldn't allow us anywhere close to it. So we went about fending for ourselves the best we could. We knew the taste of every neighbor's soup, even with our eyes closed. One Friday, during break, I was sitting alone in the roots of a giant mango tree in my school, after my friends refused to share their snacks with me. I was sad, watching other children pass by with their snacks and lunch boxes. I sighted Kambili, my sister, from afar, sitting at the window of her classroom with a senior boy. I watched as the senior opened a pack of biscuits and cut some portions which he offered to Kambili. She collected it immediately and threw it into her mouth. I envied her for that. I wished I was a girl, because the senior boys loved sharing their food with the girls. As I sat admiring her, I felt a presence, and on turning, I saw a younger pupil, a fair and slender girl, sitting on another root just opposite me. I guessed she must be a newcomer because her face was not familiar to me at all. She had a beautiful smile which revealed a set of beautiful white teeth. But more beautiful were the goodies in her hands. She held 2 mouth-watering red apples. I started salivating immediately. "May I have one of those, please?" I found myself pleading and pointing to her hands. At first, she frowned, but then after staring at her hands for a while, she threw one at me. "Thank you," I said, already biting into it. I have never tasted an apple so sweet in my entire life. She walked in disgust as I devoured it greedily. I ate both the stem and the core, humming at every bite. "Where did you get this?" I asked her, licking my finger. "My mother gave them to me. You can have this one too. I don't really like apples," she said, throwing the second one at me. Wow, today seemed to be my lucky day, snacking on 2 mouth-watering apples. I wished my friends were there to witness. I was barely done eating before the bell rang for the end of break. I thanked the strange girl and left for my class. I smiled throughout the rest of the lessons, and even at one point, I was called out by my teacher to stand in front of the class, but it didn't solve anything. I just couldn't stop smiling for no reason at all. I have never felt so satisfied. I didn't go food hunting with Kambili that afternoon. I felt so full and just needed to rest. Dad and Mom came back from the bar much later that night and Mom made 4 pieces of yam and stew for the 4 of us. I gave mine to Kambili. She was as surprised as I was, but she happily turned it into her plate without asking questions. "Thank you, Dera," she said. I was awakened in the middle of the night by a faint whisper in my left ear. I thought Kambili was playing some pranks on me, but she was there sleeping soundly beside me, wrapped in Mom's wrapper. Just then, I felt a movement from the corner of my eye, and I quickly shifted my gaze to the open window, and what I saw sent cold shivers down my spine. There at the open window was a white hand beckoning to me to come. I opened my mouth to scream, but I couldn't find my voice. When I turned to wake my sister, I discovered that my body was actually lying on the bed, sleeping peacefully. Fear gripped me. The white hand continued beckoning me. At last, the fear disappeared and I got down from the bed and walked towards the window to meet it. Surprisingly, I passed through the wall and found myself outside. The night was cold and dark, with the only thing visible being the white hand. The hand led the way down the street. I followed suit. At that moment, I had no control over my senses. The hand continued moving ahead of me, leading to an unknown destination. After a long walk, the hand stopped moving. I stopped too, leaving me staring into space. The next minute, a light flickered, though not so bright, but it was enough for me to realize I was standing in the center of my school field. But I noticed something strange about the field. The school field I know was covered in carpet grass, but that night it was a river of flowing waters. I glanced around and I realized I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by a circle of 10 girls. In other words, I was the only boy present. Suddenly, a brilliant light, reminiscent of lightning, began to dance across the girls' faces. Amidst the airy glow, I was able to recognize the faces of 2 girls. One was a girl in my class called Ada, and of course, the girl with the apple. She still had her beautiful smile on. At the center of the circle was a throne, a very, very high throne. Seated on the throne was a woman with a pair of white hands. She was clothed in a lace and had a crown on her head. As I was still studying the woman, the girl with the apple shouted with a loud voice, "All hail the Queen Mother!" "Hail!" the others responded. After that, the Queen Mother hopped down from the high throne into the water and started walking towards me. It was only then did I recognize her. Her name was Miss Peace, popularly referred to as Auntie Peace by the pupils. She was my first class teacher when I was in my first grade. I was surprised because Auntie Peace had long been transferred to a different school far, far away from ours. She stopped in front of me. "Kneel down," she commanded. I knelt down instantly. There seemed to be a force commanding my every move that night. She began to make a circle on my forehead with her finger. And when she was done, she said, "Welcome to the White Hands Club." She turned away from me. Facing her throne, she announced, "At last, a son." All the girls started laughing mockingly, and I wondered what was funny. In the end, I was given another mark on my palm and one on my forehead. "This is the sign of the White Hands," the Queen Mother announced. After the meeting, food and drinks were distributed to everyone present. That night, I ate like I have never eaten before. After the merriment, the children were dismissed and dispersed to their various destinations. I passed through the wall the way I had gone out. In the bedroom, I found my body lying on the bed, just the same way I had left it. I laid back in it. From that night on, the mysterious gatherings continued, unabated. Every single night, I joined the other kids, and as time passed, I started seeing everyone differently. My dad was not larger than an ant in my eyes. One fateful night, during the gathering, I was summoned to kneel before the revered Queen Mother. After doing some incantations, she inserted something like a ring into my left eye. "Now, you have the power to explore the world," she declared. I was so anxious to try out my newly acquired power. So as I was passing by my daddy's store the next morning and saw him measuring out yam for mom to cook, I thought that was the perfect time to put a test to the power. I just muttered the secret word and blinked. The tape my dad was using to measure the yam cut into two instantly. The man released a loud sigh and went back to his room to get another tape. I leaned back on the door and smiled to myself. This is going to be a great adventure after all. From that day onwards, nothing else gave me joy than inflicting pain on my dad. Firstly, I destroyed all his tapes, and this gave him a tough time measuring out food for mom. Then I made holes in all his measuring cups, and this left him with no option than using a bigger cup for a while. Whenever I walked in on him trying to lock the store, I would cause friction to the padlocks. I would then lean back and watch him struggle with trying to lock the door, and I wouldn't release it until I had had enough of silent laughs. I would make a hen sick anytime I craved for chicken, and Dad would have no other option than to tell my mom to kill it and make stew with it. One time, he was inside the store counting seasoning cubes into a container. I caused a big heavy crate to fall on his bowed head. He fell on the floor and hit his buttocks on the floor as he screamed in pain. All this gave me inner joy. As time went on, Pauline, that was the name of the girl with the apple, taught me how to go invisible. So I added stealing to my adventures. I stole my dad's money every night in his presence with no one seeing me. And the next day, I would spoil myself with different snacks in school. I usually hid behind my classroom, where Kambili would never find me. I laughed every time I overheard my dad complaining to my mom that his money always went missing. You need to check this house well, because there's no thief in this house, my mom would always say. There was a day he was in the bathroom having his bath. I made him slip and fall, hitting his head hard on the stone. He screamed and my mom rushed in to check on him. That day, he left for work forgetting to lock the store. Before he remembered and returned to lock it, Kambili and I had taken out enough provisions to last us the whole day. There was another time I made him fall sick, with the motive that he won't have strength to measure out food for us. But then I had to revive him again after 2 days, because he burdened my mom so much with the sickness. I used my powers mostly at home, on Dad, except on 2 occasions that called for desperate measures in school. Despite the prominent white mark left by the white hands on my forehead, Kambili was the only one in our family who noticed it. Our parents were too preoccupied to observe any changes in us. When Kambili asked how I got the mark, I lied that it was an injury from school. I knew I couldn't tell her the truth, as the Queen Mother had warned us to keep our meetings a secret. I continued to do my mischief, especially at home with my powers, until the night I was asked to do the unthinkable. That night, when I was in the 4th grade, I was given my very first assignment, which was to initiate a new member. That wasn't a difficult task for me, because I had a handful of my classmates hovering around me as I was one of the few brilliant pupils in my class. During break the next day, I brought sweets, which I shared with my best friend Henry, and he was initiated that same night. 2 weeks after accomplishing this assignment, I was given a second assignment. Now, you have to bring a soul to the kingdom, the Queen Mother said. I was confused. I have done that already. I brought Henry, I confessed. The girls began to laugh. After the laughter subsided, the Queen Mother explained what she meant. You have to sacrifice a soul, she announced. My eyes widened. I can't do it. I cannot take a life. You must, and it would be the one that you love the most. The Queen Mother insisted. That night, I left the meeting with a heavy heart. As much as I enjoyed causing havoc at home, I still loved my family so dearly, and I could not trade them for anything in the world. I was sober throughout the day in school. I sat alone under the mango tree, ruminating over the matter, when Pauline walked up on me. I shared my worries with her, and she tried her best to cheer me up. You're even lucky you were allowed to think it over. In my own case, I had no choice, as I was initiated the very day I was born, and I was given just one task, she lamented. What tax were you giving? I asked curiously. I was asked to ensure that my mom does not give birth again. She blurted. Why? I mean, how do you do that? I further queried her. She bent her head with her hands on her jaw. I get the signal anytime she conceives. Then, in a pretense of sharing a mother-child bond with her, I hit her stomach severally with the invisible ring in my hand. She confessed. I put my hands on my head in disbelief. You do that? Pauline nodded. I had watched my mom lose 3 pregnancies in the past 5 years. She said, This is not good. Why did you put me into this? I quarreled her. She smiled. And why did you initiate Henry? She asked. I didn't say anything anymore, as it dawned on me that it wasn't entirely her fault. My lack of self-control did. Later that night, my parents got into an argument and my dad ended up beating Mom. Camberly and I cried ourselves to sleep. At the meeting that night, I presented before the gathering my dad's beating sponge. This belongs to the one I love the most, and I'm ready to offer him for the sacrifice, I said. Who is that? The Queen Mother asked. My father. The Queen Mother frowned. You cannot lie to the court, son. Your heart is open before me like a chapter in a book. I know the one you love the most, and the white hands are coming for her tonight. She finalized. All hail the Queen Mother, Pauline declared. Hell, everyone responded to the end of the meeting. I went home, very, very sad. Camberly was curled up inside the blanket, sleeping soundly as ever. I stared at her pretty face for the last time. A drop of hot tear escaped my eyes and dropped on her cheeks as I bent over to peck her. I will miss you so much, dear sister, I muttered. After that, I wiped my tears and lay down beside her. I was awoken the next morning by a sharp cry. I slowly opened my eyes to the faint morning light peeking through the curtains. My mom's loud moans filled the air, and I felt her warm tears dropping onto my face. Confused at first, my eyes were red and puffy. Her face twisted in pain. As I sat up, my gaze fell upon the bed, and my heart froze. Camberly lay still beside me, her eyes closed as if she was sleeping. But something was wrong. Her skin was pale. Her mouth hung slightly open. Mom's cry grew louder, and she pulled me into a tight hug. I felt her body shake against mine, and my own tears began to fall. The lines of congealed blood tracing from her nose and the corners of her mouth, combined with the twisted angle of her head, served as a grim reminder of the previous night's events. I recalled unleashing my magical powers upon her as she struggled against unseen forces. I wept. After a medical examination, she was declared dead. She must have been choked by something she ate, the doctor announced. Mom threw herself on the floor, weeping uncontrollably. Camberly was later buried and forgotten. Her soul rest in peace. After her death, Mom and Dad decided that they should give more attention to me. They believed Camberly died as a result of neglect and did not want the same fate on their only surviving child. Though the quantity didn't improve, they started making sure there was food in the pot for me to eat whenever I returned from school. Again, Dad stopped Mom from going to the bar on Sunday, so she stayed back to spend quality time with me. But I did not think I needed the attention anymore, since I couldn't get it all those years. Again, after Camberly's death, I lost all sense of humanity. Nothing scared me anymore. To me, sacrificing the one you love the most was the greatest wickedness. So what more can I not do? All I needed was power, and more power. I just wanted to be above only. I had no sympathy for anyone or anything, not even my parents. I made my dad sick for a month after Camberly's burial. But my mom suffered more because she was turned into a nurse and doctor since he wouldn't spend his money on drugs. Why should I go to the hospital for ordinary malaria? He had argued. I wasn't promoted to a new class after the third term examination because of my consistent truancy following Kambili's death, and that's ill health. Henry and Ada moved into a new class, leaving me with a group of juniors. That same term, Henry sacrificed his mom. There was a particular boy named King among my new classmates. Everyone knew King those days to be the best pupil in the whole school. He had once represented the school in a spelling bee contest and came out the overall best. Everyone loved him, including the teachers and the headmistress. I wasn't happy with the gaps he was giving me in class tests. So one night, I made a request from the Queen Mother. I want to be the best in my class. I want all my classmates to be under me, I requested. I was instructed to buy a stick of sweets in the next meeting. I did as I was instructed, and after doing some incantations on the sweets, I was asked to take it to school the next morning and make sure King eats it. When I offered him the sweets, he collected it, opened and ate in my presence, suspecting nothing. During our next test, the two of us sat close to each other. The boy copied everything I wrote, including my name. I was so happy. The teachers were worried about him. They called him into the principal's office for interrogation, and he confessed that he forgot everything he had read. What more could they do? Soon, I became everyone's favorite. Everything was going just the way I wanted, until a new boy showed up in the school. His name was Timothy, the only son of a roadside preacher. From the first day he was led into the 4th grade class by his mom, I despised him in my heart. I got very jealous when teachers started complimenting Timothy for his brilliant performances in tests. So during our meeting one night, I requested permission to eliminate Timothy. Little did I know that that was going to be the final straw. The Queen Mother gave me a stick of sweets for Timothy after her usual enchantment. But unlike Kings, Timothy declined the offer. "No, thank you," he said. After much persuasion, he finally accepted it, but he stuck it into his breast pocket. "What is stopping you from eating it now?" I asked him. "I have to show it to my mom first. She wants me never to eat anything without showing her," he explained. His response got me upset. "Don't tell me you are a mommy's boy," I mocked him, with the intention of making him feel bad and start eating the sweets. Though he felt bad, Timothy refused to give in. "I'm not a mommy's boy. I'm only obeying my parents just as we were taught in Sunday school," he said. "Which Sunday school?" "You're all deceiving yourself because even if you eat these sweets here, your mom or your so-called Sunday school teacher will never find out." I tried hard to persuade him. Yet, Timothy refused to eat the sweets in school. And the text was the next day. At the meeting that night, I reported Timothy to the Queen. She assured me that the boy would take the sweets before the next morning. But to my greatest disappointment, the next day after the test, Timothy got the highest mark again. Again, at the meeting at night, I complained bitterly, so the Queen decided to do it the other way. She tried invoking Timothy's spirit to a mirror, but the mirror cracked. There was commotion in the kingdom that night, such like never before. The meeting was brought to an abrupt end, as the Queen Mother urged all the members of the White Hands to go home and get ready for the battle ahead. This got me confused. I had witnessed the killings and manipulations of so many others through that same mirror, by just invoking their spirit into it and either commanding the victims to do your biddings or stab them directly with a plastic knife. When I got to school the next morning, I sighted Timothy and his mom standing in the office of the headmistress. I purposely decided to pass through that lane in order to know what they were talking about. On passing by, I overheard the headmistress begging the mother to allow Timothy represent the school in an upcoming competition. And I became bitter once again. Seriously, this boy was standing on my way to success. I should be the one to represent the school after I had succeeded in eliminating King. Who is this Timothy boy anyways? I wondered. That night in the coven, the White Hands were fully fortified for the battle. I wondered why we had to pass through such stress because of an 8-year-old boy, but anything to get the boy out of the way. Again, the Queen tried invoking Timothy's spirit into a new mirror, but this time, the mirror shattered, splashing on all the White Hand members. The meeting was brought to an end again, but before we left, I was given a red apple to give to Timothy. Do everything possible to make him eat this, the Queen Mother had commanded. But Timothy would not collect the apple from me the next day. I tried all I could to persuade him. And when it was obvious the boy wouldn't eat, I decided to prove to him that it wasn't poisoned. I bit into it myself, and that was the height of it all. Everything changed form in my eyes. The next minute, I slumped at Timothy's feet. In a trance, I saw myself standing in our coven before the Queen Mother, and for the very first time, she was without a crown. "What have you done, son? You ate food meant for another? Do you know what you did?" She spoke angrily at me. I wanted to say something to defend myself, but I discovered that my voice was sealed. I couldn't open my mouth. "You're on your own from here now, because even the white hands cannot save you now," the Queen Mother concluded, and then turned her back on me. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying in the school field. At that instant, everyone moved away, making way for Timothy, his dad, and a young man to enter the center. "Don't worry, my child. We are here to pray for you," Timothy's father assured me. But I didn't think I needed his prayers then. I looked around for the White Hands members, but surprisingly, none of them were present at the gathering. And it was strange because there were about 10 of us in that school. I wondered whether the trance was real. Does it mean that the Queen Mother had actually abandoned me to my fate? I doubted it. As I was still thinking, the two men and pupils were busy praying. At one point, I felt fire all over me, forcing my mouth open. This was followed by a loud voice screaming for help, and everyone listened up. "I am a member of the White Hand cult. We kill and we destroy. I killed my sister, and my mission was to eliminate Timothy." The loud commotion from the crowd couldn't allow me to hear the rest of the confession, but I was sure that I heard Timothy's father saying something about Timothy being a destiny child. It was after the young man sprinkled some anointing oil on me that I realized that I had been the one confessing. I began to scream out in pain, and at the same time awaiting the arrival of the White Hand members. But then everything went dim. I found myself in the coven again, crying and begging the Queen Mother for forgiveness. Her back was still turned on me. "Even the White Hands cannot save you now," she repeated. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself at home with my parents. I was lying on the bed. My mother was sitting by my side, sobbing, and my father was pacing up and down the room. I tried to move, but discovered I still couldn't move my legs. "He's awake!" my mother screamed excitedly. "What have you done, Chidera?" my father yelled at me. They had heard everything. "Ikenna, this is not time for this. You know that whatever happened was entirely our fault. We pushed him into it. Please, stop," my mom said. My father stared at me for a while with so much anger in his eyes. Then he left the room and slammed the door behind him. "I will make you something to eat, my dear," my mother said, and left the room. But she re-entered almost immediately with Timothy's father and the other man. I looked away immediately. I hated seeing those men. After some hours of fervent prayers, I felt a force leave my body, and I began to scream with a loud voice. Then, everything I had done started playing like a movie before my eyes. I remembered how I strangled my darling sister, how I turned king into an imbecile, and so many other things I had done with my supernatural powers. I felt so bad. After all, I had been possessed all along. After my deliverance, I listed out the other members of the White Hands in my school. Luckily, some were delivered, while some others died before the deliverance. Pauline was one of the latter group. She confessed to her parents before she gave up the ghost one cold night. The Queen Mother was never heard of ever again. I'm 23 years old now, and I have been confined to a wheelchair for the past 13 years. But I still believe in God for a miracle. The moral lesson of this story, it has so many lessons to be learned for both parents and for kids, but I'm only going to list a few of them. To all the parents, remember, Your child's happiness and safety should always come first. Don't sacrifice their well-being and emotional needs in the pursuit of material wealth. Parents should teach their children to stop taking things from strangers. Not just teach them, but also provide enough for them and not leave them hungry and being tempted to take things from strangers. In the case of Pauline, who was initiated at birth, parents should be mindful of the kind of persons they entrust their infants to. Don't allow strangers carry your babies in public. And even when you give birth in the hospital, don't allow anybody or everyone touch your baby. Husbands should allow their wives take full responsibility of the kitchen. And even if you must be involved, do not be a miser and provide enough for your family. Children should learn not to take things from anyone in the absence of their parents, even if they were forced to. They should not eat it without showing it to their parents. In everything, always commit your family into the hands of God. Anoint your children every morning and pray for them fervently before sending them off to school, because the world we are in is full of mysteries.